It's 2 a.m. and your eyes snap open. You check your phone, see the time, and feel that familiar dread creep in. You lie there thinking, why does this keep happening? Why can't I just sleep through the night like a normal person? You scroll through sleep articles, you count backward from your alarm. You wonder if your body is somehow more broken than everyone else's. But here's the question nobody asks. What if that 2 a.m. wake up isn't a malfunction at all? What if, for most of human history, waking in the middle of the night wasn't the exception, it was the plan? Before electricity rewired our nights, did humans actually sleep better than we do now? This isn't just you. Millions of people jolt awake in the dark and instantly assume something inside them is broken, when the timing itself might not be the problem at all. Maybe the panic isn't about the waking. Maybe it's about what we've been taught a night is supposed to look like. So the real question is this. Did people 300 years ago sleep straight through until dawn? Or has our whole idea of normal sleep been shaped by something as recent as the light bulb? Rewind the clock past streetlights, past light bulbs, past gas lamps flickering on city corners. Go back to a world where the only light after sunset came from a fire or a candle, and both of those cost money and effort. In that world, night didn't last 8 hours, it lasted 12, sometimes 14. Especially in winter when the sun dropped early and didn't return until what feels, by our standards, like the middle of the morning. Picture a household with no bulbs, no glowing screens, just candles burning low and then going dark, and a night that stretched on and on, with nothing but shadow and quiet. That length of darkness matters more than most people realize, because your internal clock doesn't measure time in hours. It measures time in light. And back then, light disappeared early and stayed gone for a very long stretch. Inside that stretch of darkness, something happens in the brain that most of us have never actually experienced in its full form. A structure deep in the brain called the pineal gland starts releasing melatonin as darkness falls. And without artificial light pushing that signal back, melatonin would start flowing hours earlier than it does for most people today. Not at 11 at night after the news and one more scroll through a phone. Closer to early evening, right as true dusk settled in. That early melatonin rise eased the body toward what historians and sleep researchers now call a first sleep. Old diaries and letters mention it almost casually, the way we'd mention lunch. People wrote about lying down for their first sleep shortly after dark, waking sometime later, and then returning to a second sleep before dawn. It wasn't a special term for something rare, it was just how a night worked. Here's where it gets interesting. That first sleep didn't roll straight into morning. Somewhere in the middle of that long dark stretch, the body would naturally surface. Not with panic, not with a jolt, just a quiet lifting into wakefulness, the way a boat rises gently with a wave, instead of being thrown by one. People would lie there in the dark, awake, aware, calm. Some got up and tended a dying fire. Some prayed. Some talked quietly with a partner in the same bed, voices low in the dark room. Letters from that era describe this window almost fondly, a strange peaceful hour tucked inside the night, used for thinking, for connecting, for simply resting the mind without needing to be unconscious. Then, after that window passed, the body eased back down again. Melatonin, still supported by the ongoing darkness, guided them into a second sleep, carrying them through until close to dawn. Two distinct phases, one quiet gap in between, not a broken night, a structured one, shaped entirely by how long the darkness lasted and how the brain responded to it. What's easy to miss is that this pattern likely wasn't some accident of pre-industrial life. It may have been useful. A body that surfaces briefly in the middle of a long night is a body that can check on danger, notice a sound outside, tend embers before they die completely, or simply reset mentally without fully waking the senses needed to survive in an unpredictable environment. An animal that sleeps too deeply for too long in the wild is vulnerable. A built-in middle-of-night alertness window may have been less of a glitch and more of a quiet survival feature, baked into the architecture of sleep itself. Then everything changed, and it changed fast. Gas lighting arrived, then electric bulbs, then televisions, then screens that fit in a pocket and glow directly into the eyes at midnight. Each new light source did the same thing to the brain. It told the pineal gland that darkness hadn't really arrived yet, so hold off on that melatonin. Evenings got brighter and busier, and the natural dusk-triggered melatonin rise got pushed later and later. Instead of starting in early evening, it might not meaningfully rise until closer to 10 or 11 at night, sometimes later for people staring at bright screens right up until the moment they try to sleep. The long dark runway that once supported two distinct sleep phases got compressed into a single shortened block, squeezed into 6 or 7 hours with no true darkness cushioning either end. This is the collision point. A brain that still, in some deep evolutionary sense, expects a long stretch of darkness with a natural gap in the middle, now gets dropped into a bright, light-saturated evening, followed by an expectation of one unbroken block of sleep from lights out to alarm. So when that same brain does what human brains have done for thousands of generations, surfacing briefly somewhere in the night, it isn't following any modern script. It's running the same old segmented rhythm humans have carried since long before electricity existed. Except now, instead of glancing calmly at dying embers by candlelight, the person reaches for a phone, sees glowing numbers reading 217, and immediately assumes the worst, not because the waking itself is unusual, but because nobody told them it might be an old rhythm quietly resurfacing. So back to that 2 a.m. moment, eyes open, room dark, mind already reaching for the phone. Here's the part worth pausing on before your hand even moves. The thing that turns a quiet middle-of-night surfacing into a spiral isn't the waking itself. It's what happens the moment light hits your eyes. A phone screen, a hallway light, even a bright bathroom bulb tells your brain that daytime has arrived early, and daytime means alert, means checking, means thinking. That's the switch that turns a calm, dark gap wake window into 20 minutes of staring at the ceiling, doing math about how many hours of sleep you have left. The body's real off switch for that panic isn't effort, it's darkness. Protect the dark, and the ancient rhythm has room to keep doing what it's always done. So here's a way to actually test this, without an app, without a gadget, without tracking a single number. For 1 week, in the last 90 minutes before bed, dim the lights around your home lower than you normally would, and set the phone down instead of scrolling through it. Let your evening get quietly dimmer, instead of staying office bright until the second you turn out the lamp. That's the entire setup. Nothing complicated, no new gear, just less light doing its usual job of holding your melatonin release later than it wants to go. Then comes the real test, and it happens automatically. If you wake up at 2 a.m. during that week, notice what your hand wants to do, and don't do it. Don't reach for the phone. Don't roll over and check the clock. Just stay still in the dark, and notice. Notice the quiet. Notice whether your mind feels calm, or whether it wants to spiral. And notice, without forcing anything, whether your body drifts back towards sleep on its own, somewhere in that 20 to 30-minute window. You're not trying to fall back asleep. You're just observing what happens when you remove the bright light and the panic response and let the old rhythm run uninterrupted. This matters because of what you now know about where that wake-up came from. Long before clocks and alarms existed, this exact moment, eyes open in the dark, mind quietly aware, was simply the midpoint of the night, not a symptom, not a warning sign. Just the seam between first sleep and second sleep, the same seam people once used to tend a fire or share a few quiet words before drifting back down. Your body isn't failing at sleep. It may be running a program old enough that it never got the memo about light bulbs. So over the coming nights, don't look for a dramatic fix. Just notice small things. Maybe the dread that usually hits the second you see glowing numbers on a screen feels a little quieter. Maybe your mind doesn't race quite as fast in the dark. Maybe sleep comes back a little easier than it used to. Or maybe it takes the same amount of time, but feels less like failure and more like a pause. Any of those small shifts are worth paying attention to, not as proof of anything, just as information about how your particular body responds when the light disappears and the panic gets removed from the equation. And the next time your eyes snap open at 2 a.m., before you reach for anything, try picturing a candlelit room 300 years ago. No screens, no alarm clocks. Just quiet darkness, and someone lying there exactly like you are right now, awake, aware, unbothered by the hour, waiting for sleep to ease back in on its own. You may not be broken, you may simply be remembering something your body never actually forgot.